Welcome back to Lead Lamp Podcast. This week we have Brett Thackara, meteorologist from ABC 27. Everyone's probably familiar with your face, but including myself, not a lot of us probably know about your background and how you got where you're at today in our community and how we see you on TV every morning. So kind of give us a little bit of a background, and I appreciate you coming on our podcast this morning.
Well, it's the Brett show apparently, right? So that's it. But no, thanks for having me, Brett. I appreciate that, and everybody here at Lead Lamp. But I started really becoming interested in the weather like a lot of meteorologists do when I was a kid. And I think there's a lot of things that contributed to that, just from at first being scared of thunderstorms and wanting to learn more about them. And then the blizzard of 1993, it was a massive storm that came up the East Coast, and I think we had 2 feet of snow. I grew up in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, not far from here, right up the Susquehanna River. And school was canceled for a week.
Forever.
Felt like forever. So that piqued my interest. And then the movie Twister came out, when I was a kid, and now the sequel's out. So, but all of those things contribute to when you talk to a lot of meteorologists, they had something happen to them as a kid that really sparked their interest in weather. I loved watching, our local weather people on television, and I thought, that's what I want to do. They seem to have a lot of fun. They talk about different changing weather. Certainly, it's never boring, right?
Right.
Weather is never boring.
It's always weather.
And so I went to Penn State, got my degree, and then luckily through God's grace or many blessings, we ended up here because my wife is from this area. A job at ABC 27 became open very soon after I graduated, and I've been here ever since.
Nice.
So,
it's funny you mentioned the blizzard of 93.
Yes.
That's like, not only weather-wise, I'm not as into meteorology as you, but like weather-wise, that's one of my first like vivid memories, I think, as a kid.
Yes.
I just remember, I grew up down in Grantham, just down the road here. And I remember 15 was shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And you could walk, we walked across 15 to the Unimart to get bread.
And what made that storm very unique is it happened in March. So it was a late season storm. And it just was one for the record books. And
no one was prepared.
Right. Everybody was by that point, their brains were flipping towards spring. And but it was a wild storm. So I remember that too, growing up in central PA. And it just stuck with me. And I thought, being able to forecast that, understanding how that happens, and then being able to communicate that to people would be sort of a great thing. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a good lead into the next thing. What's a daily routine look like? Because we see what you do on screen, obviously, in the morning when we're getting our weather forecast, or in the evening, depending on who's on. But what's the daily routine of a meteorologist as far as when you get there, you're receiving data, you have to translate that to a message that people will understand on TV?
That's exactly right. And it's a great question because I also am fortunate. I really like morning TV. So mornings fit me like a glove. It fits my personality. I like having a little bit more fun. I like being a little bit looser than you can be on an evening broadcast. And so I've gotten lucky there too, because I get to communicate the weather for the day, kind of set the stage for the day for everybody, but at the same time, have some fun with it. And I think most people can appreciate that. So a typical day starts, my alarm goes off at 2:50 a.m. Okay, so it's more the middle of the night. But from that point on, I get up, try to get into the office, into the station at 3:30. So that gives me about an hour. So our morning show goes from 4:30 to 7. And that gives me about an hour to get a lot done. First thing I do is make a cup of coffee because I need that to survive the mornings. Then I sit down and forecast. And when you have been forecasting as long as I have, you do get into a routine, especially if you're paying attention to the forecast day in and day out, the model, the computer guidance that we use, and you have the experience I have in this area, it becomes a lot easier to put together a forecast more quickly. So especially, like Mondays will take me a little longer because I'm coming in from the weekend. I'm not paying attention, right? But today, for example, I know what's going to be happening. So come in, I will forecast for about 45 minutes. I'll make the graphics that go on the screen. I'm constantly tweaking them, updating them during the course of our morning show. I put a little bit of makeup on, which, yes, even the guys have to wear makeup in TV because we don't want to be too shiny for the lights. And then it's away we go at 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we do our own forecasting. Everybody at ABC 27 is a meteorologist, a degreed meteorologist. So, it has become common. It was common in the old days, and it's becoming a little bit more common now to kind of have a face rather than a scientist. But we're all scientists, so we actually do our own forecasting, and then we communicate that to the public.
Is that not common in some weather? I mean, we don't have to talk about different stations that do different things.
But I do think it's becoming more common to just have somebody
they get fed a forecast script.
And go on and talk about it. And some of them are very good on TV, but they don't know the weather.
I think the one interesting thing I remember, and this was probably even from when I was a kid, that was interesting. My parents always watched 27, so I grew up on like Chuck Rhodes.
Oh, yeah.
With like he had the little graphics that would go across the bottom of the screen.
Classic, right?
But I know I don't think I've ever seen anyone else do that. But the one thing that was interesting, and it plays into what you just said, is when big storms would come through the area, there would often be, and you guys still kind of do this, like a breakdown, not episode, but like a breakdown explanation or a separate show where you would go into
details.
How it happened, what happened to make this storm explode or go crazy or get 3 feet of snow. And you kind of still do that with like I think you guys still do this, but the winter outlook kind of it's like special, or you'll do like a summer or spring outlook special. I noticed that you guys do a lot more in detail stuff like that than some other news places locally.
Well, and I think that helps give us a bit of credibility. Right? Now, again, it's not for everybody. And there's a big majority of the population that just want to know, what is it going to do today? What is it going to do tomorrow? But then I think there is a subset of the population that wants to know a little bit more. Everybody's kind of fascinated about the weather. And whether you're going to a party, whether you're going out, whether you're meeting people you don't know, it seems to be a common topic of conversation.
It's an easy thing to talk about.
It's an easy thing to talk about. So I think that there's this fascination with it. So most everyday people just want to tune in and get that forecast. But there are a certain group of people that do want to go beyond that, and so we try to serve that audience as well.
Do you think it's a lot of? I mean, we have a heavy agricultural industry in this area. Do you think a lot of that group there tends to want to gravitate towards longer term, more trending type forecasts for like the summer? The summer's looking like it's going to be wetter than normal or drier than normal. Is it? You think it's our area being heavy ag, or what is that?
I think that's part of it. I think in general, there's just people, as I said,
have interest.
Yeah, people have that interest.
Okay.
They want to know how we do it. But, our chief meteorologist, Eric Fingenmeier, is a farmer. And so that's really what got him into the business. I have a story like many weather people do, where it was a certain storm that they remember really sparked their interest. But with him, it was the farming, it was the agriculture. And he's constantly looking ahead, constantly wanting to know about rain. And I think he's not alone in that. And he writes a report for Lancaster Farming Magazine. Lancaster County is especially big in ag. He lives in Perry County, has a farm up there. He needs to know. And so I think there is a lot of farmers watch us very early at 4:30 in the morning. That's their time to get up and get out the door. So I think that's very important. And I think it gives them a sense that, hey, these guys actually do know what they're talking about, because they're actual meteorologists, and one of them's a farmer. So he gets what we're going through.
Yeah, he's in it with them.
Exactly.
What do you think is, through your normal day, everyone has a thing. We all have a thing that kind of ignites that passion. It keeps you going. It might have changed over time, but like, what's that thing that you realize, like, this is awesome, this is really cool, that leaves you just wanting to come back and do more?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know if I just have one answer. I think that the weather is always changing. So my job is never boring. I'm never doing the same thing every day, even though parts of it are the same, right? I mean, I'm getting up, going through a routine, doing the shows, but the weather is never the same. There's always something to talk about. And I think that helps keep it fresh. Just the fact that TV has changed so much over the years, and it is constantly changing, but TV or media, because it's not just TV anymore, right? It's the web, it's YouTube, it's apps, it's putting yourself out there on social media. You have to feed every single beast, but that keeps it fun because you have many different avenues to reach people.
Mhm.
Well, that can be exhausting to some. And it certainly has changed the way the business operates. I find it fascinating because you can get your message out to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
It's very widespread if you're not even if you're good at it, but if you just look at what's available.
Exactly.
And I don't know, you probably find it, this is more of a media discussion too, because this is what we do. But you often find, I'm sure you have too, where you can record one or two things and slice it up or reformat it for 10 other outlets.
Avenues. Exactly. And sort of feed this audience and that audience. And, of course, there's always the talk about audience erosion today.
Mhm.
And, not as many people are watching here or there. But local news is still a little different, too.
Yeah.
Local news is more trusted than national media these days. And it also still reaches the most people because it's on a broadcast network.
And it's a dedicated audience usually. Like people don't switch from one news channel to another, especially local news channels.
Yeah, because
weekly.
they've watched that since they were young people. They know who to go to. And not only that, but you're reaching new audience as well. My forecast videos are on YouTube every day. I'm talking to people on Facebook every morning. I do a segment called Coffee Talk on Instagram. So these are all different avenues that make the job maybe more creative than you could be 10 or 20 years ago. But I think you're feeding that audience, which is what it's about. And people want the information. And again, not everybody wants sports information. Not everybody wants cooking information. I'm trying to think about all these different things that are out there. There's an audience you're feeding, but so many people want weather information, right? So
what affects everyone?
It affects everybody.
At some point in the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that there's always going to be a place for that, and there's always going to be a place for being able to be a weather presenter, in my case, an actual meteorologist that people trust and that they want to tell them what it's going to do because we're busy, right? I'm into many different things outside of the weather, and I need to find, if I want golf tips, I need to find somebody I trust to go to that and watch a YouTube video or somebody on Facebook or the Golf Channel. Somebody that's interested in weather needs to know that they can come to my pages and trust me. And so I think that's important. You've got to build that up with the audience.
Yeah. Let's talk about that real quick. You briefly alluded to it, but it was one of my questions for later. We'll just jump to it now.
Yeah.
Is like, what are you, everyone, we know you're a meteorologist.
Yeah.
We're going to get back into some fun questions regarding that. But like, what are you outside of what we see on TV and delivering the weather? Because obviously there's other things you do.
Yeah, there are, it's a great question, and I think I'll answer it in two ways. I'll answer the question directly and indirectly. But indirectly, I will say that I think that one of the things that you've got to be when you're on television is you have to be authentic. That doesn't mean that I'm the exact same way I am in private as I am on television, but I'm pretty close. Because I think that if people sense that you're inauthentic, then you come off as a phoney. And there's plenty of people on TV that are phonies, and people don't like them.
It's probably easy it is for us to spot.
Yes.
It's probably even easier for you or someone in your profession who does it genuinely. And you're like, what? This is not you.
And one of the things I noticed about the business when I was getting into it 20 years ago, you would intern places, you would go job shadow places, you would do some work. I started working part-time at many different stations, and you could pretty easily pick out who was different. And when I got to ABC 27, the first thing I noticed was that everybody was pretty down to earth. And that made me feel at home. And that's why I've stayed for so long. But you want to work in an environment like that. And so I think that I've had a lot of people tell me, friends of mine, that will ask them, what's he really like? Is he really like that? And they'll say, yeah, pretty much. And I think that was always my goal, too, is to be the same person I am for the most part on and off camera. Right? Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean I don't have my moments, right?
We all do. Yeah.
We all do. But I think that the silly, the wackiness, the trying to be loose and not take yourself so seriously, you can't take yourself seriously. And I think so I take the weather seriously. I take presenting it seriously. Don't take myself seriously, because then you sort of risk getting, especially in television, an ego. You got to throw that out the door.
Yeah.
Because you can get taken down real fast. All you have to do is go on social media and read the comments, right? If the
cut you off the knees. Yeah.
So, but outside of work, my family is very important. As I said, I met my wife at Penn State. We have 2 kids. They keep us very busy. And that's what I find to be my purpose now, because it's great. I like the mornings for the reasons that I said. The bosses aren't in yet. We can do whatever we want. We get to have a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm home by 11:30 in the morning, and I can get the kids off the bus, and I can cook dinner, and I can do the things with the kids that I like to do. And so that was always important to me. But I like playing golf. I like playing poker. Like watching TV shows and movies, true crime podcasts.
Okay.
Right? So, and I listen to a lot of podcasts on my way to work, and I think those of us in media, and a lot of people at the station are like this too. We like to take in other media, right? Because it's, and I'm sure you're the same way, that we kind of want to know what's out there.
Right. And not that the last thing you want to do when you're taking in media, as an example, is shape or change yourself to fit something that you find that you like, but it's still good to take pointers from something. I'm sure you're constantly changing minor little things here and there.
Well, you're trying to find the next thing. And I think not that you want to copy or directly rip off of somebody, but when you can find something that works, if you can imitate that and make it your own.
We've called it here in marketing, it's like swipe and deploy.
Bingo.
So you take an idea.
Yep.
You take the skin off of it and keep the foundations and build it around what you want to do then.
You build it around your own personality, and it has to be different, but you can sort of get some ideas by the more you watch, the more you listen, the more you take in. And that's another thing I think that you have to be open to when you're in the media, is you have to see what else is out there. Don't think that you have all the answers, but especially in this changing landscape, try some ideas. They're not all going to work. Some will. Some won't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall.
Exactly.
Some of it sticks.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of want to get into Central PA too now.
Okay.
So this is kind of going to go a couple different directions, but let's start out with just you grew up in this area too, so a little bit north of here, but
right.
What do you find that's unique about Central PA? I'm sure you talk to people in your profession from all over the country or even the world, but what's unique about Central PA, not just weather-wise, but just the way you see the culture of it, the community, and kind of where we're at?
Boy, that's a great question. It's a loaded question only because there's 1,000 ways to answer it. Right? We live in a very unique region. So let's talk about the region as a whole before we get into the weather part. Mm-hmm. And what I like about it is when you go to a media market, and I'll talk media markets here or local news markets. Let's say you're out in Indianapolis, right? That media market is Indianapolis and then the surrounding area. You've got New York City and the surrounding area, Miami and the surrounding area. Here, you have got Harrisburg, of course, which is the capital city and the biggest. But then you've got Lancaster, York, also big cities locally with their own flavor. Mm-hmm. Lebanon.
It's the hilly demo.
The hilly demo. And then you've got Hershey, Gettysburg, Chambersburg, Carlisle. So we are made up of centralized cities, but Harrisburg doesn't necessarily dominate over Lancaster. Lancaster doesn't dominate over York. Lebanon is there too. And then you've got all of these smaller towns, but that feel like their own thing, right? Mm-hmm. Hershey feels like its own thing compared to Gettysburg. Carlisle feels like its own thing compared to Chambersburg. So it's just a vast array of different towns.
Everyone locally even identifies like with their town.
Yeah.
Like I'm not from the Harrisburg area. I'm from Newville. Like that's where I'm from. But Newville's so wildly different than Chambersburg, Shippensburg, and Carlisle, which is
and an outsider might say, "Oh, you live in Hershey." No, I live in Hummelstown. Right? It's that distinction, but that's what makes it very unique. And then we've got, as you said, not only these cities and these urban areas, but then you've got the agriculture right in between all of that. You've got the Amish in Lancaster. You've got Hershey Park. You've got the Battle of Gettysburg that was fought. Chambersburg in Franklin County, just an up and coming metropolis. So.
And you have tons of forest land too.
Yeah, tons of forest land, state parks. It's just it's a very unique part of the country, and it's growing, and it's vibrant, And so, while I was just a little bit north of here, it was nice to move here because it's got such a unique flavor, and each town has a unique flavor, and you're a day's drive from Philly, New York, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. If you want to go to a big city and a big market, you can do that.
It's a day trip.
It's a day trip. So that's what makes it unique. Now, weather-wise, my goodness, we've got it all, right? And I always say this, I get to forecast blizzards and tornadoes and all of it. And not only is the flavor of the geography and the towns unique, but you've got the mountains to the west, you've got the Atlantic Ocean to the east, you've got the Chesapeake Bay, you've got flat farmland, you've got hilly land, you've got the Susquehanna River, right? And then you've got cities, and you've got rural spots, and you've got forest land, as you said. So all of this plays into forecasting in a big way, and it's very complicated. I will argue it is one of the most complicated areas to forecast. Because the temperature in Lancaster is going to be far different than the temperature in Perry County. But I've got to put one temperature up on the 7-day forecast, right? The snow that they might get in Perry County is different than the snow that they might get in York County.
All right, so I have to pause you on that. Yeah. So what is it just a geographic mark, or is it an actual thing where you guys you always seem to forecast it along the turnpike or the 81 split? Is there something geographically or weather related that is actually near those landmarks that seems to affect storms, or how's that?
Well, the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
The answer is yes and no. So it's easy for people on a map to point out those roads.
They know where the turnpike cuts across.
They know where the turnpike cuts across, and it basically divides our area north and south. They know where 81 cuts across because it basically divides our area northwest and southeast. Right? So a lot of times, especially if we're talking about a coastal low, there's a very sharp cutoff. The farther you are from the coast, the less snow you're going to get. So areas north of 81 are going to get less snow. Areas south and east of 81 are going to get more snow. So these things typically tend to follow those roads, which are great markers for us, but they also just happen to be easy things to point out on a map. Okay. A lot of times lows coming from the Midwest kind of track right along the Mason-Dixon line, the PA-Maryland border. Well, if that happens, then we can use Route 30 as a guide that cuts right in the middle of our southern counties. So we just try to find easy markers to follow for people. And if you live right along there, sometimes you're divided up. But again, snow is one of the most difficult things to forecast. And everybody wants to know how much they're getting. And
then they want to know like 3 days before the storm too, I'm sure.
3 days before the storm, which is tough. And you keep in mind, when we forecast snow, we're actually forecasting liquid equivalent. So, 3 to 8 inches of snow is really 0.3 to 0.8 inches of rain. Now, if we were forecasting rain, nobody really cares about that. Right?
And is it not, I'm not the meteorologist, but is it also not always a 10 times conversion?
It's not always a 10-to-1 ratio, right? So you've got to take that into account. Then you've got to take into account the actual track of the storm, because some counties are going to get less than other counties. And, there's very subtle changes in snowfall. So my argument is always to people, if we say 4 to 8 inches of snow, that's why we give ranges with snow. But also, if you get 2 inches of snow or you get 10 inches of snow, right? That's only 2 inches off. You're really going to be mad about it, right? But some people are, and that's just they want us to be dead on the money. But I think the forecasting has come a long way. We're very close, and we're much better, now than we were even 5 or 10 years ago with that stuff.
Do you think that? So we use a lot of AI tools.
Yes.
Is that something that you see being incorporated into meteorology now, or do you see that changing?
It's always going to be changing, right? And we continue to see new models being developed. We continue to see AI models starting to be developed in the weather space.
Is it more on prediction?
More on prediction, yeah. And I think that the AI models are going to be just as good as any other model, depending on the data that they get in. Yeah. And we've seen AI models, some of the new models coming out that have wildly whiffed on
garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. We say that all the time. So I think there's always going to be a human element to it. I think people get scared of AI, right? But I think as long as people are responsible with it and use it to maybe make their lives easier and not replace things.
It's a utility.
I think it's a utility. Right. And I think that is going to be the way to use it. There may be a day when an AI forecast model, really does great stuff. We're not seeing it quite yet. And it's more about a blend of all the models and the forecaster's experience still. Even AI, to me, I would rather be sitting here having a face-to-face conversation with a person than a robot or something that I know doesn't feel. And I think there's always going to be a place for that. Humans like humans, right? We need that contact. So I think AI is a tool, and I hope it's used responsibly.
Yeah. I mean, we're still pretty early in its advent, so
We are.
We'll find out. We use it quite a bit. But like you said, it's metered how we use it. So we make sure we're not just blindly
following his lead.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to go through everything with a fine tooth comb, because it does put out some wild stuff every now and then.
It sure does. Yeah.
And you don't want, you're not going to be wanting to put a forecast up that's like unmonitored through AI, because it could, like you said, if you're putting garbage in, you could give a wild forecast, cause panic or misinformation on it.
You want to review it. And that's why, we can look at models and say right now, this model's just absolute trash. It's throwing out 20 inches of snow. We know we're not going to get it. And now that model is taken and it's thrown on social media by every amateur forecaster. Right? And that starts to work up the public. And we're saying, whoa. Now, again, I think most people are smart enough to get who they can trust and who they can't. But that's the kind of thing we want to. We see it all across society with undue and unnecessary panic. And we need to just slow down a bit.
Right. There's a lot of, and some of it's intentional, but there's a lot of hype that's generated. So,
exactly.
Yeah. What do you think is I'm going to go back to the Central PA thing, but what is, I'm going to get specific. So this should be an easier, not as broad of a question. What's the hardest thing to predict other than snow? We just talked about that, but like, what makes this area so hard to forecast? Like you said, there's so many different factors that go into it. Like, and you can even use an example, but like, is there an example or an instance where you just saw something and you're like, this is wild?
Well, I think severe weather, tornadoes, is another very difficult thing to predict, because we still don't know a lot about tornadoes. We know the type of environment it takes for them to develop. And we know that our region can get tornadoes. Any region can, if the environment is right.
What's the big unknown about them? I mean, I guess in general.
Well, I think in general is just that we have a tough time getting inside of a tornado, right, to get that data. Now, they've come up with different ways to do it over the years, but hurricanes, you can fly into those and get data. We can't really fly into a tornado. It's so violent.
And sometimes they happen so quick.
They happen very quickly, and that's the other thing. Tornadoes here, most of the time, are very small and very quick. You have your exceptions, like we just did a story with Chuck Rhodes about the Campbelltown tornado. And that was, I think it was an EF2 or 3, and that just leveled a whole community.
And that's not even as big as what they see out in the Midwest. And that was extremely severe for this area.
It was extremely severe for this area. And so a lot of times what we see is these ingredients coming together for a very ripe, severe weather day. And then maybe the storms fall apart over the mountains. You're talking like west, like the Alleghenies. West. Yeah, we see a nice line coming in. We think we're going to get severe weather. We think there's a chance of tornadoes, and then the line falls apart. Right? Then we don't get anything.
Are the mountains out west of our area that much of a disruptor?
They certainly can be. Yeah, they absolutely can be. And then sometimes we get east flow from the Atlantic, which is a disruptor too. We call that cold air damming. When we get a marine layer coming in from the Atlantic, it sets up shop, and we could bust a temperature forecast by 10 degrees because sometimes the models are not great at picking that up. But I think from a business standpoint today, one of the things we've seen with weather, and this is where we have to be very careful, is we see a lot of hype about severe weather and about being prepared and all of this. A lot of maps with a lot of colors on it. And I'm guilty of showing them too. The problem is, as a consumer, you've got to really be discerning. And I was just having this discussion yesterday with Dan Tomaso, who's another meteorologist with us. And he said, I think sometimes people hear there's going to be severe weather and they think their lives are in danger. Now, that's not always the case. You have to really be discerning. So if we talk about severe weather, that means there's a chance of it. That means that you need to take precautions within reason. Nobody needs to panic here. But the other thing is, too, I think what happens is the National Weather Service puts out a lot of watches and warnings. And if it doesn't happen, people are less likely to pay attention to it the next time, right? And so if we're under a tornado watch, and that just means that there could be a tornado, if there are no tornadoes, people will be more likely to ignore it the next time.
It slowly erodes that.
It erodes that trust. And so we have to be very careful about how we talk about the weather. Not everything is doom and gloom. And, every weather event that comes through here, you're going to probably survive. It's not that bad. But when the weather does get active and, we talk about hurricanes or tropical storms coming in here, you've got to be prepared and you've got to be smart about it, but it doesn't mean that you have to panic. And I just think that there are better ways to communicate this information to the public so that they don't ignore it. Because the minute they start ignoring it, that's going to be the time when it happens.
I think and we don't need to this is a very loaded topic when you talk about news in general, not meteorology. But I think you see that, I've noticed that more. You and I are not much different in age, and I notice it more than I did ever.
Yes.
Where large, maybe we'll just say bigger news organizations or sites they'll be very dramatic about almost every storm. It's front page news.
Every storm is a monster. Every storm is the worst.
It seems like it's getting more and more. Local news really doesn't do that. When you go to the homepage for a lot of our local news sites, they tend to not. It seems to be more of a national thing, and it's not clickbaity, but it starts to feel that way. And I see where you're saying like that sets up a cycle of like people expecting it to be terrible. It's not. Right. Oh, it's just another story.
Well, and exactly, it's another story. Now, again, an example would be a few weeks ago we had a system come in with thunderstorms. And those storms were expected to put down heavy rain. Well, I talk about flash flooding, and I talk about how we need to be prepared for it. Now, we just had a summer of drought. The National Weather Service is putting out all of these products about flooding. Now, they forecast for a larger area than I do. But the point is, I'm never going to mention flooding and hype on that after we've had a summer of drought, right? That does not make any sense.
Right.
And 95% of the viewers we get across this area we're very hopeful for these storms.
Yeah, this rain we need this badly.
So to use the term flooding is just, to me, tone deaf. Now, what you have to do is you have to say, in localized spots that see 2, 3, 4 inches of rain, it's not going to be widespread, but there are low-lying areas that could see some flooded roadways. Basements might take on some water. Streams and creeks are going to rise a little bit in certain areas. And that's all you need to say.
Right.
So now, again, we saw with this line of storms, most people got an inch or two of rain. We're very thankful for it. There were some water rescues, though, in Adams, York, and Lancaster counties. Well, very localized. The area's got 4 or 5 inches of rain. Okay. Now, if you see water on the roads, right, you got to be smart. You don't drive through it. But I also don't think I need to scare the entire region that we're going to see massive flooding. We didn't. We saw massive flooding on a couple of streets, and the people that it impacted that had to be rescued, of course, it mattered to them. But most people went about their day and just saw some rain.
And you're not creating hype for a larger area.
You don't need to panic people. And I think that too many times people panic, and then when nothing happens in their neighborhood, well, then they ignore it the next time.
What do you think is the coolest, for you personally, the coolest weather phenomenon or event to watch unfold? I'm sure when you see it happening, you're like, this is, it might be rare even.
I think it's got to be snow.
Yeah.
I mean, the older I get and I have to worry about the kids and getting them where they need to go, I don't like it anymore.
Yeah. Now you got to shovel the driveway and you got to clean that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, adulting, right? But I love watching the build up to a snowstorm. I love how our forecast evolves. I love watching it fall. I think it's a tiny little miracle that these white flakes are falling out of the sky and they pile up and kids can play in it, and people it makes people happy most of the time, right? As I said, I complain about it. But yeah, snow is just one of those things that people buzz about, they talk about it. And most people, even if they have to drive in it, most people still there's a wonderment about it, and I like that.
My team knows I can't stand winter. I hate winter.
Okay,
but as much as I don't like snow, because I got to clean it now. Like you said, when you're a
I hate
kid,
it.
you don't have to worry about any of that.
It's great when you're a kid.
Or you might even get $20 because you help shovel a driveway, but
Bingo.
I don't get that now.
That's right.
But I do think there's still some excitement or like a mystery about snow, especially overnight snowstorms.
Yes.
When you wake up in the morning and it's like, where did all this come from? I went to bed, there was nothing, or it just started, and now there's
That's what I like.
8 inches.
When people wake up and see that, then they tune in, and I'm there for them. And I like that because I'm watching it unfold kind of with them.
Yeah.
But there is something magical about you go to bed, there's nothing there. You wake up and it looks like a whole new landscape, right? I love it.
It's wild. Overnight snowstorms, if I had to pick, are probably still the best because they don't disrupt traffic. You're already home.
You're there.
It's a convenience thing. It snowed. I didn't have to go anywhere.
Exactly.
And I probably can work from home today.
And that's what we have now, which is nice too. Yeah.
Let's talk about your on-air personality, I guess.
Yes.
I'm going to go into you a little bit and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Obviously, as you saw in our graphic, you get to have some fun. You talked about that earlier.
Yes.
Obviously, the station that you're with you're fortunate enough that they give you guys the liberties of having some fun and some personality. And you see that across most of the newscasts that 27 does.
Right.
So everyone's probably seen you in the pool. Kind of explain how that came about. I wanted to talk about that.
Well, yeah. So, I am somebody that wants to have fun and be creative. And it had been a while since I had really thought about anything different in the mornings, and I felt kind of stifled, not from anybody at the station, just that, it was a long, hot, boring summer. We haven't had a lot of active weather, and, some ideas you try, some worked, some didn't. And I said to my producer, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I said, we're getting this big heat wave in June. I said, I'm going to blow up a swimming pool. I'm going to sit out and give the forecast. We have a pavilion now in the back yard, and it's equipped with lights, and so we can do some broadcasting out there. And I said, I'm just going to sit in that pool and give the forecast and say, this is the place to be. And then right before we hit on the air, I thought, this pool looks a little lame. There's nothing in it. So it just came to me, and I said, what if we had our viewers send in inflatable toys? So I got on the air, and I didn't know if it was going to work out or not. But I said, by the end of summer, I want this pool filled up. So if you want to see me in this pool, send in a bunch of crazy stuff, and let's have a party, and I'll do it on Friday mornings. And so the idea was just organic, and people at the station got a kick out of it. And then we just had the mail just never stopped. And I don't think anybody quite realized how big this turned into.
You got inundated with Amazon packages
with toys, and so it was incredible. And the viewers, had a lot of fun. So we'll have to donate all of the toys, I think, or do something with them after the pool season is over. But and that gives me a little bit of inspiration and a little kick too. That hey, people are watching, right? People care about this.
Not a good metaphor, but they're tuned in. Like they're locked into you guys. Yeah.
They're locked in. And sometimes, keep in mind too, you're watching from home, and sometimes it's easy to think that we can see you. Well, we can. Very many times I'm just in the studio with 2 or 3 other people. It's quiet, and you hope somebody's out there taking it in. And this proved to me that there's a lot of people out there.
That I don't want to go too far off again, but that's a good point. You don't have an audience. You're not on a stage typically. I mean, you guys do a couple events where you have your weather events.
Sure. Yeah.
But you're not like typically in front of an audience. Is that a challenge that you run into often where you're like, you start to feel like, is anyone even consuming this? Obviously, they are.
They are. Well, you know that inherently, but sometimes you it's very quiet. Sometimes you need that energy. Yeah. And so this was my way, in a sense, of saying, this is a community. Right. I want the community involved. It's something silly, but let's get involved. And so now I'm trying to think of other ways to do it.
Okay.
Could we get a dunk tank back there and and put me up there for a show?
I have to find a winter themed one now.
Well, yeah, because I said we'll do it. I'll be out there in the winter. That's fine. I want to be out in the weather because I'm a meteorologist. So, but it was a great response from the viewers, and they that does give you the sense that, okay, we're all in this together. Because sometimes, especially, in those early mornings, 4:30, I'm in there. It's just me and the camera person. And it's like, is anybody
still dark outside?
It's still dark outside. Can anybody, hello? Is anybody home? Is anybody out there? And this proved, there's a lot of people out there that like what we do. And you feel good because you're not only engaged, but you're serving the community. You're doing them a favor because they want to know the weather, but they also want to feel like they're your friend, or it's an honor to be invited into somebody's home. And that's really, it sounds cliched, but that is what they're doing when they tune us in. So we take that seriously.
Yeah, they're choosing you guys to deliver them their news or forecast for their day. Yeah.
Exactly. It's an intimate space because a lot of people have us on in their bedroom. A lot of people have us on in their kitchen, and they're watching us from the privacy of their own home. It's no different than a podcast space where a lot of the podcasts I listen to, and I'm not alone, I know, they're alone in their car. They're very intimate, so they feel like they know you if they're listening to this podcast. And so they feel like they know me when I'm in their home every morning, and that's important. And again, that's part of the job you have to take seriously because you want to be their friend. You want to be part of the family.
Right. Okay. All right, let's wrap up with just real quick words of wisdom or some advice for somebody who maybe is younger than us. Maybe they're in high school, they're not sure what they want to do, but they have an interest in meteorology or they have an interest in the sciences. What advice, not just even meteorology, but just generally in science, what's something that you would give advice to a younger person or anyone really who's looking to make a career change or choose a career in the path that you chose, just to get started and kind of how to get, everyone has a dream of being on the TV, but I'm sure there's other outlets too. So how to get a career now.
I think you have to be, well, number one, be authentic. And I've said that before, but that's my biggest message. You've got to be authentic, and you have to be able to work with a vast array of people. Doesn't mean you have to get along with everybody, but you've got to be authentic, and you can't be afraid to be yourself. And the second thing is hard work. A lot of people are immune to that today. But the reason that I am where I'm at is because the meteorological part of this was very difficult work. It was one of the toughest majors at Penn State behind engineering. We had a lot of math and science to get through before we would get to the fun stuff of actually making a forecast and presenting it on TV, right? So, and no matter what career you're in, whether you're a dentist, whether you're a lawyer, right? There's a lot that you have to slog through to get to the fun part of the job. And so I think that you've got to be willing to put in the hard work. And if you're willing to do that, well, then by the time you get to be our age, or when you get to be into your 30s and 40s, then the work should be fun. It should be rewarding. And you've been around the block enough that people respect you, but you've got to earn it. You've got to earn that respect, and you've got to earn people's trust. I have to earn it from two places. I have to earn it from my colleagues and managers at work, which everybody knows is always a challenge. But then, more importantly than that, I have to earn it from the audience, the viewers. And I've been lucky enough that they've all kept me around. I hope they keep me around a lot longer. And then lastly, you've got to, you're going to be given opportunities, and you can't squash them. You've got to take opportunities when they're given to you. And I had a few lucky breaks in my career, but I took them. And they helped. And so I think that you've got to be open to possibilities would be my last piece of advice.
I think that's a good piece of advice for like any profession. You kind of have to slog through some times where you're doing a lot of work for not a lot, or you're really just doing things just to get them done and kind of build your resume up.
Right.
Until you get to that moment. And there's really not a defining moment where you're like, oh, now it's fun. But you notice as you look back, like, oh, now I can enjoy a project. Because now
I can enjoy it. Now I've earned the respect of everybody else. But I see a lot of people coming up that feel entitled, feel like, especially in our business, what else I had to do? Not only did I have to do all of that hard work, but I had to work a lot of weekends. I had to work a lot of holidays because that's TV, right?
The new guy gets on.
The new guy has to do that. And some people have to do that for 5 or 6 or 7 years before they move up. If that's not for you, then you have to find another job that maybe you don't have to do that. But I think a lot of times people want the instant success. And you know what? There are jobs out there that you can maybe have that. And if you do, that's great. maybe you'll get a lucky break, but then you've got to take it. But if not, keep working, keep plowing ahead. Something will happen if you work hard. And sometimes you have to make your own luck too, whether it's changing careers, changing jobs. But you've got to be authentic and you've got to keep working hard and something will happen. That's just my belief.
I mean, that's like a perfect wrap up for this because I think that applies to anything that anyone's doing.
Yeah.
So
well, I hope so. But this has been a lot of fun. And I know too, I love calling this place home. And I'll say one more thing. People always ask, did you ever want to go to a bigger market like a New York or LA? The answer is no, because I grew up here. I feel at home here. And I feel like the community has welcomed me in. So I don't really have a reason to look outside of this place.
And you kind of know the people.
I know the people.
You don't know. I mean, you don't know the guy walking down the street.
Everybody.
But you know the culture and you know the community very
exactly.
well. Yeah.
And that makes it home.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I had a lot of fun.
Me too.
I wish we could have talked a little bit more about some little bit geekier things, but I think we flew through some of the questions really well. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the time.